Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Tommy, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey there. I'm so glad that you're on the podcast with me today. I've got my friend Bryan Morykon with me, who is an incredible singer, songwriter, creative. And Bryan, I'm so glad that you are with me on the podcast today.
It is so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I got introduced to you and to your music by your incredible wife, Joy, who's been in my artist mentoring program, and we've been getting to know each other over the last year or so. And she's like, well, you know, my husband's a singer-songwriter. And I'm like, really? And as soon as she sent me your music, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is rocking my world. And so I've just so appreciated getting to know your heart through your music. And I hope that we can, for everybody, introduce you to folks who may not know what you're doing creatively and really hear the place, from which you create. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah, sounds good.
So tell me a little bit, about your world currently, because for folks that are just getting to know you and that sort of thing, I know for most creatives, we don't just do one thing. And so usually we have a lot of different irons in the fire. And tell us kind of what your world is like currently, and then I'd love to dive into some of your backstory as well.
Yeah, well, like you said, I am married to Joy, who is an amazing woman and super creative. And my day job is as director of communications of a nonprofit called Renovare, Renovare. And Renovare, we do conferences and retreats and have a 2-year discipleship school and put out a lot of online articles and small group resources and do some publishing and stuff like that. And so I get to manage their website and send out weekly emails and do a little bit of writing and, shoot some video courses, and I'll wear all kinds of different hats like you do at a nonprofit. And so that's a blessing to be able to do that as a day job, and a lot of creative aspects to that as well. And then musically, I guess you could say right now is my side gig, but it's my heart. And been playing guitar for almost 25 years now, and songwriting for nearly that long. So that's a little bit about my history.
That's good. I was in marketing before I was doing my art full time, and my art was kind of my side gig as well. And I had no even thought about ever doing it full time, but it's been interesting how the roles have been reversed and kind of back and forth through your life. Things that you think are over, or things that seasons of your life you're like, oh, I'll never use that again. Now it totally comes back around. And so
that's right.
I love that, how God does uses everything. And for me, I think growing up, my mom was a choir director and musician my whole life, and so I grew up in that kind of environment. Did you grow up in a creative home, musician's home, that sort of thing?
I didn't grow up in an especially creative home. I did grow up in a Christian home, so I was at church all the time. My dad is a counselor, my mom's a nurse, and but they were always very supportive. My dad bought me, and I don't know what prompted him to do this, but he bought me a little guitar at a flea market for $5 when I was 13.
Wow.
And he brought it home, and it sat there for a little bit. And I remember a Young Life leader came over, and he picked up that $5 guitar, and he played a song on it. And that was a life-changing day for me, because I thought, I want to be able to do that, what he's doing. He's making this $5 guitar sound beautiful, and I got to learn how to do that. And that was it. That was the spark that God used to get me started. And my dad said, if you learn how to play that, I'll buy you a nicer one. And I did, and he did. And that's where it started for me.
It's amazing, I think, how God uses those moments like that, right? That ignite something inside of us that we didn't even know was there most of the time. And I just think that's so beautiful. Have you seen that commercial by chance it's flying around the internet right now? It's Elton John Christmas commercial, and it's they actually show Elton John like right now, so he's probably what 70 years old or something,
Yeah.
playing in his living room, and then it rewinds his life in video and in concerts and all this kind of stuff, all the way back to the time when he was 3 years old and his mom bought him his first piano and he played his first note. Oh, it's so beautiful. But it's like you never know, right? What those one moments are
You
gonna be
don't.
like.
You don't. And it's a reminder to us of encouraging others, is like, you just don't know when that moment is going to be for somebody, to just a little piece of encouragement. I mean, that for me, that young life leader, he has no idea. I don't even know his name. I don't know
Mm,
how to find him, to thank him or anything.
wow.
But it's just that one little moment for 5 minutes when he picked that up. If he hadn't have done that, I probably wouldn't be playing guitar today.
Wow. Now, did you always lean to the songwriting side of things, or as far as a place of expression for yourself, or when did that start to come along with the music end of things?
Yeah, probably a year or two into playing guitar, I just started writing songs. I was just thinking before we started recording what my first song was. I think it might have been one I wrote for my sister or something. But it was 10 years of really bad songs before you get a good one. I didn't know they were bad at the time. That's kind of one of the joys of starting off creating in your youth, is that um, your your taste hasn't outpaced your skill yet. When we
Mm.
become adults, our taste has far outpaced our ability to do that, our skill, right? So we can like appreciate something that's really good, and then we realize like where we are, and it's so discouraging. But as a child, especially if you're taking piano lessons or guitar lessons or something, and you might be learning a classical piece, for instance, like you don't have the capacity to actually appreciate that.
Right.
Most kids. And so your skill is actually outpacing your taste. And there's a gift there. And as adults, it's just, something we have to learn to overcome with the Lord, that gap. But yeah, anyhow, so I started the songwriting pretty young.
Yeah, I think all of us always joke around with visual artists. I'm like, you got to create a lot of ugly, before you
That's
get
it.
to the beautiful. But there is that balance in the creative process, I guess, that is what keeps it interesting, right? It's that tension of the struggle of pressing into and pressing for something, and yet knowing at the same time, I'm not quite there yet, but I'm going for it. For me, I think there's that for a lot of people it can shut them down, but for a lot of people it can drive them, toward
Right.
developing themselves. And it sounds like that you are always able and continue to really use that as a driving point in your development.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's right.
That's really cool. And as far as ever thinking about, you know, doing your music professionally, creating CDs and that sort of stuff, I know you've done so much of that in your life and leading worship and all of that. When did you really begin to kind of take your gifting beyond the family, beyond just folks that knew you, and really say, hey, maybe God wants to use this in a larger way?
Yeah, the journey's been interesting. When uh, I was 19, and I got married at 19, very, very young. And had one of my groomsmen asked me what I wanted to do. And I told him I wanted to start a recording studio.
Mm.
And he actually invested into that. And so I started this recording studio, and which sounds uh, kind of glamorous if you don't know anything about it. But if for anybody who's actually done any recording on a local level like that, you realize if you open it up to the public, you're recording a lot of gangster rap and Shania Twain covers, and whatever. Yeah, you just do whatever you can to pay the
Whatever's
bills.
paying the bills, right?
And so that became a cobbler's kid don't have any shoes kind of thing, where I opened it up because I love music, and eventually I wanted to keep some of my own music and that sort of thing. And of course, in the 5 years that I owned the studio, I recorded, I could count on one hand the number of my songs that I recorded of my own music. It just became one of those things. And so I ended up selling the studio and doing fallen back on web design to pay the bills so that music could become kind of a hobby again. And around that same time, I started leading worship at a church, which is not something I ever saw myself doing. In fact, the worship leader who was there, really remarkable guy. In fact, I just did a podcast for Renovari. His name's Scott Baker, and he passed this year. And so I did a little podcast remembering him and his influence on my life, because he just, he really showed me a different picture of what a worship leader could be. I had a certain stereotype of what I thought that had to be, and he really blew that out of the water in a good way. And so when he stepped away in 2006, around then, they asked me to lead worship, and I said, "Do you have anybody else?" And they said, "Not really." I said, "Let me pray about it," and felt like I was supposed to step into it, and I did, and did that for about 2 years, and it was a growing experience, just a part-time thing still, but it grew me a lot. But at the end of that 2 years, I realized, it had for me become largely a logistical thing of like picking the right songs and getting the worship team together, and doing the thing, the grind of it. And there's grind in every job, but when it becomes primarily grind, then you have to look at it. And so I stepped away from it and actually laid down music for a while, almost entirely for a couple years. And it wasn't until we moved to the Charlotte area, and some things in our life that had happened with Joy, and she might have shared a little bit of her story on the podcast, and just some things that happened with her, and an illness that she had, and the way the Lord healed her, that really, sparked, sort of reignited some things for me when we moved to the Charlotte area, and then the music kind of came back to life again, in some interesting ways. And I'll share one quick story about that. So when we first moved to Charlotte, there's a place called the 24/7 Prayer Room, which is this particular one is like an old warehouse that they converted into this like prayer space. Imagine like a coffee house meets a, I don't know, monastery. It was just a really unique space. And I started going there on a regular basis, and a guy asked if he found out I played music. He's like, "Hey, do you want to do some worship here?" And I thought, sure. And so I agreed to it. And he said, "Great, it's 2 hours." I thought, 2 hours. And they said the only worship I'd done is like leading in this congregational, more traditional kind of worship songs, 3 to 5 minute worship songs. So I thought, that's like 25.
You're doing a little worship
songs,
multiplication in your mind, right?
Yeah, I'm doing the math. So I get my binder songs, and I show up, and he's there, and he's kind of finishing up his set, and he's like, "Okay, it's all yours." And I said, "There's nobody here." And he said, "Yeah, man, it's for the Lord." And I thought, yeah, it is for the Lord, isn't it? And so I started playing, and that first week I just plowed through my binder, right? And then I just kept doing that week after week for about 6 months, and showed up, and it would just be mostly me and the Lord. Maybe some other people were hanging around, but it was devotional worship. It wasn't congregational worship. And that was a huge shift for me, because gradually the songs would linger a little bit more. Gradually some spontaneous songs would come out of that. And of course there were times of boredom, times of where it's 2 hours long. So, but on the whole, that was a pivotal point in my journey, musically and spiritually, where it went from being a logistical affair of just getting something done to music being this medium through which you can connect with the Lord, and ascribe worth to the Lord, and so that was yeah, that was an important moment for me.
That's so good because I've often told people, I grew up as a musician and led worship for a lot of years and all that kind of stuff, and definitely experienced kind of the baggage that you're talking about worship kind of becoming a logistical exercise and a performance kind of thing, as opposed to
Yeah.
really devotional at heart and that sort of thing, and laid it down at the same time. And it was interesting that when the Lord began to kind of re-energize my creative journey, it was in the context of my basketry and this weaving stuff, which I was like, what does this have to do with Jesus at all?
Right.
But it was this creative expression that I had that had no agenda with it. And I found
Yes.
that the Lord
Yes.
really was able to breathe into that in such a beautiful way. And now my music, funny enough, is kind of coming back to me in this season of life, which is funny. In fact, I just bought a new piano this fall, and
Good.
it's just so funny. I'm writing again. It's like, oh my gosh. But I think we almost have to kind of separate from all the stuff around what we do in order to bring it back to this place of beauty. And
That's it.
that's really what I want to kind of step into with you, because I think, when Joy introduced me to your music, one of the things that really struck me really hard was the lyrical depth from which you write. And you come across as this really super thoughtful and like emotionally and spiritually present kind of person. And I'm like, wow, this guy has got history with the Lord. You have walked through some stuff. You're really writing from such a beautiful place. And so how did that evolve? Because it sounds like as you got more connected with your own creative process and with the Lord, maybe you begin to write out of that place as well. So
That's it. Yeah, you're right. And from an early age, I longed for authenticity and gravitated towards people like Keith Green or Rich Mullins,
right.
Folks who might know who that is, musicians. And I would listen to Rich, for example, and he has a song called Creed, where he just sings the Apostles' Creed.
Yeah.
But somebody else could sing that, and I would not want to have anything to do with it. And Rich can sing it, and I believe him.
Yeah.
I believed him. And so there was something about this authentic and real voices that I was always on the lookout for. And then I would try to emulate in my own songwriting. And at a young age, it really is just emulation. Because for me, I didn't have the life experience or hadn't suffered and been through suffering with the Lord and had that suffering redeemed to be able to have that belly deep authenticity that I loved so much in these people. But that was okay. Like, it was okay just to try and just imitate it, even though anybody who heard it would clearly hear, like, this is just an imitation. But that was okay. Like, that was the beginnings of my journey. And it wouldn't be for, years later, 10, 15 years later, went through some really hellish times, and my faith was deconstructed down to nothing, and had to really say with the Lord, like, what do I believe anymore? Really get down to that point. And I remember one day when things were in the thick of when Joy was sick, and I just wasn't sure which way was up, and I didn't know what I was believing about God anymore. And this Andrew Peterson song came on called The Good Confession. And the chorus is, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I heard that and I thought, I believe that. That's it. I know that. I don't know anything else, but I know that. I believe that. And that was kind of the reconstructing of my faith. And probably the start of really writing songs and singing from a place of authenticity, authentically singing from that place that I was imitating so many years ago.
Yeah.
But it took passing through suffering and allowing and being honest with where I was at with the Lord. And thank God for the Psalms, right?
Oh yeah. Come on.
It's, David's, we're reading through the Psalms at work right now, one a day. And so we're getting into all the nasty ones. And it's just so liberating that David and the other writers could be so honest about things, and that God said, I want this in my holy book. I want this there. I want this honesty there so that my people can know how to pray, and that I want you to be honest with me. And so that's what it takes, getting honest with the Lord to really get to that place of creating authentic art.
I feel that because two of the songs that really speak that loud and clear to me in your music are the song Who I Am off your Flame of Love project. And then I love the one that you just wrote, I think, called Wounded Boy, which you said you wrote from the back of your Buick Rendezvous, which I love that. And that's
which is where I sit at this moment.
At this very moment. Well, hey, there's Matt. And one of the things that I found over the years in working with artists is that real lasting change in our life happens best in the context of supportive Christian community. And that's why I wanted to take this opportunity just to take a second and invite you to be a part of my online community called the Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Listen, this group is absolutely free, and over the years has actually grown to thousands and thousands of artists in just about every creative medium from countries all over the world. The cool thing is that it's become a real place of encouragement and life for artists, just like you and me, who want to share their work, share their life, connect with other artists, and really pursue everything God has for us as artists in his kingdom. Now, listen, to join, all you have to do is just click the link in the show notes here and answer a couple of questions just to let us know that you're a real person, and bam, you're in, okay? So, listen, I can't wait to connect with you inside of my Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Do it now, and we'll see you there very soon. All right, bye. It seems like the Lord's really had you on a beautiful journey of identity, developing and solidifying your identity in him. And talk a little bit about that journey, because I know for so many of us that are coming into this thing I call thriving as an artist, spiritually, creatively, in our business, just walking in the kingdom, identity is core to that. And it seems like that's been a real core part of your journey as well.
I'm still on it.
We all are,
and, right? In a big way. I was looking at your questions you sent ahead of time. One was, what was your biggest challenge in becoming an artist, and how did you or are you overcoming that challenge? I'm definitely I still am overcoming. And the biggest challenges are fear of rejection and fear of success. Yeah. And they're both rooted in not knowing my identity as being loved and accepted by God. And I'm overcoming that in the secret place with the Lord, and just sitting quietly with him, setting my mind on what's true and right and good. And with even something as simple as in the morning, I really struggle with, like C.S. Lewis talks about, your thoughts rush at you like wild animals in the morning, and you have to do something with them. And I struggle with that. And so I've been trying lately to practice waking up and whispering out loud, so I don't wake Joy up, like, the Lord is here. The Lord is in this room. The Lord is present. And just verbalizing reality, as I'm just coming into agreement with what is true. And the truth sets you free, right? And so God is really present. He is more real than anything that we see. And when just voicing that in the morning, helps to clear my head a little bit most mornings. And then I try and spend a couple minutes, even before I arise, just meditating on like a scene from the Gospels, maybe Jesus washing feet, or another gospel scene, or like this 23rd Psalm, just picturing myself as one of the shepherd's lambs out there, and the shepherd with a smile on his face, leading me into a good green pasture and leading me beside waters of rest, and just being there with that place. And it's not just wishful thinking or positive thinking. It is reality. It is the way things really are. And when the other thoughts are coming at us, it's the temptation to believe in something that's fantasy, that's not reality. And so it's coming back and agreeing with what is true. And that's a great battle for me. So that's one way, a sort of private way. And then the other way, which I'm amazed at the freedom that comes from this, is just by stepping out and doing something with my gift for other people, playing a little house concert, playing, leading worship or something like that. And the God's mercy and graciousness to use us even when our motives are mixed. And, because I'm a recovering perfectionist and I want to get everything cleaned up before I do anything. I want to have all my motives pure, and like, right, they're not going to be totally.
Right.
And God is so kind to use us anyway. And he meets us on the way as we step out. Like, I can't wait until I feel better about doing things or feel ready or whatever. As I step out and do something, he meets me in the moment. Like, most of the time when I'm getting ready to play a show or something, I have so much mental garbage. So the accuser gets so loud, and I can try and pray or whatever, but a lot of times that doesn't go until I strum the first guitar note.
Just jump into it, right?
Just start doing it. Yeah. And yeah.
That's so good. One of the other songs I love of yours, I love so much of your music, but is this song called Be Kind off your album, The Smallest Seed. And it really exemplifies, I think, the spirit of your music, and even what you're saying right now, just kind of unconsciously, I think, is your music and the essence of what it carries, I think, really calls people to something. It calls us to our greater self in the Lord. It calls us to the fullness of the kingdom. And when I think of you, I only know the social media you, right? So I don't know the real you yet, but you seem like a really nice person, like a really kind person. It seems like that you really believe this thing that, and I'm not, I want this to come across as authentic as possible. Like, you really believe that Jesus can change your life. You really believe that there's a change that's happened in you. And because of that, you need to be walking in such a way that that transformation is touching others, not in some religious, churchy way, but in a really practical, I love you in the hard stuff. I'm kind to everybody that I meet. I'm trying to release the kingdom in a real natural way. And I know I'm making a mess of how to say that, but I just, your music evokes that. It does. It has that very much. I'm surprised that you said Rich Mullins, because I'm like, oh, I love Rich Mullins, but it has that same kind of feel of drawing you to a greater truth in the kingdom. And I guess just talk a little bit about that, because it seems, although it's nonverbal, to me, it's like a glaring part of who you are and what you do musically.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to ask my wife if I'm really kind. That's where, and my children, that's where it comes down to it.
That's right.
And yeah. Well, just on that for a second, it's the perfectionist thing, that has been one of the biggest struggles for me. Is I am very, and in fact, the social media me, and if you looked through our window, at our house, like, you would say, wow, he's a really nice guy. He does all of the right things, right? But what I long for is to become the kind of person who does those things naturally,
Mm.
because that's, those closest to you can see when you are doing things sheerly through grit. And uh, grit and willpower, they are very useful, but they are a depletable resource. And
That's right.
if you if you just try and run your whole life off them, then you're going to become depressed and angry. Whereas if you use the willpower to put yourself in a place to receive from Jesus only what he can do, and you're right, I really do believe that he can do, because I've tasted of it in small measures, that you use your willpower to do things like spend time with him in the quiet place, to do things like serve and other spiritual disciplines, not to earn anything, but so that you just put yourself in a place to receive what only Jesus can do in you, and only he can transform you, and only he can really make you be kind. And that's why that song, the line that's repeated most in that song is, Jesus will show you how, right?
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
kind to one another. Jesus will show you how, and not just once, not just show you. He will show us in Scripture and in other ways, but he will teach us also in the moment, when we pause and ask him. And he is alive and well and still speaking, and he wants to teach us.
That's
He
right.
wants to teach us how to be kind to each other.
It's one of the interesting things, I think, that all of us who are creatives and who put our creative process out for others to partake of have to deal with this thing that when we write something, or I know, when I wrote Unlocking the Heart of the Artist, my first book, and people started asking you to speak, and, I'm going to conferences and blah, blah, blah. And I told my wife, I'm like, they think that I've like done all this perfectly. Like I've got all the answers.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm
Yeah,
writing this out of my journey, and I'm writing this by faith, and I'm
yeah,
writing this by prophetic unction to myself. It's like it's the mystery of the kingdom, right? It's here now and it's coming. And I think the
that's
same
right.
is true for us. It's these things that we write so easily that go out and can bless others creatively are still being developed in us. And isn't that the
Yeah,
beauty of being able to walk with Jesus and realize that even in process, he wants to use us and delights in using us in that.
that's it. That's it. That's so good. It is about the process. And we all hear that. It's become such a cliche,
Right.
it's about the journey, about the process, or whatever. But I hope the familiarity won't put too strong of blinders on us, because it's so true that it is about doing life with God, and about the journey that we're on, and about cooperating with him, and trying things and failing, and that we're doing them together with him. And that's the beauty of it. I've been thinking about the 70 disciples that Jesus sent out pretty early on in his ministry, I
Yeah.
think. And they didn't really know who Jesus was. you know? They didn't understand his message about the kingdom or what he was bringing. I mean, the 12 didn't get it till after he had been raised from the dead. But he sends out the 70 nonetheless. Go out there, do this stuff, and they go and do it, and they try, and they experiment with the Lord. And that's we get to do that too. He's so kind like that.
Oh, that's so good. I know there are so many creatives that are listening right now that are maybe musicians, maybe on the visual art side, whatever, that want to create out of this place of authenticity that you're really endeavoring to cultivate in your life. If you had to give them one thing, the one thing, right? One thing that's really, really been key in your journey and in allowing you to mine the depths of authenticity in your creative journey, what would you say to them?
I will say this from a songwriting perspective, and I'm sure visual artists and others can translate it to their own medium. So when I'm working on writing a song, I know that I'm onto something when it moves me to tears.
Mm,
When tears begin to flow because I've said something that's so true that it just resonated with something deep inside of me.
Wow.
And the end product might be a little different. I might not keep that line. I might, I might tweak that a little bit, because art, I believe, is the art that you share is meant to be understood in some way. There's mystery to it and there's depth, but like, you're communicating something.
Right.
Even in abstract art or things like that, there's something that you're communicating. And so that initial thing that moves you might have to get shaped into something that better communicates. But it's that is a good starting place to being authentic, is when finding that thing that really moves you. And if you're not there yet for your own art, to look at other people's art and say, okay, why is that moving me so much? What is it about that? And Lord, help me to get to that same place in my art, where I'm able to communicate authentically in a moving way that connects with my heart.
That's so good. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for being on today. I know that folks are going to want to connect with your music and all that. Where's the best place that they can connect with you online and to hear more about what you're doing?
Morykon.com, MORYKON.com is a site that has my music on it. And then Bryan Morykon. I'm not on social a whole lot. I'm trying to get better at that. But yeah, there's not many of us Morykon, so you'll find me, or my wife, which is good too.
Awesome. Well, Bryan, thanks again so much, and just all the best to you as you continue to plow forward in what God's got for you creatively and just in Him as a son. So thanks for being on.
Thanks, Matt. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.